Good morning, and welcome to the Universalist Church in which love is the spirit. We're glad you remembered to set your clocks ahead and are here in the sanctuary or anywhere in the world, especially those visiting or returning after a time away. I am Mike Zanta, one of the co-moderators on our Board of Trustees. If you are a visitor, we hope you'll talk with our welcome team or visit our webpage at westhartforduu.org to learn more about us. Our guest book or online contact page will help you get onto our electronic mailing list. Our electronic communications are the best way for us to stay connected. We look forward to helping you become part of the Universalist Church. Though numbers have dropped dramatically in our state, we're still dealing with colds, flu, and COVID. Masks are always welcome here. If you would like a mask, our ushers can give you one. After worship, we'll have fellowship and Fisk Hall and through Zoom. If you need help finding your way to Fisk Hall for our fellowship hour, any member of the church will be happy to guide. Just look for someone wearing a Universalist Church name tag. You can find the link for Zoom in your weekly news or a Breeze calendar. If you aren't getting the weekly news, please sign up for it on our website. And now, I invite you to take a moment to make your mobile phone silent, turn off your email, and put away your keyboards, and settle in for worship.
For those of you who have a home chalice, I hope you'll light yours as we light ours here in the sanctuary. We light our chalices knowing that the heat and light of flame is held, cradled by the chalice below it. And just so are our flames of joy, of life, of anger and action, of wisdom and love. They too are held, cradled by the chalices of our hearts, our communities, our congregation, and our whole worldwide Unitarian Universalist family, too. Our opening hymn is number 170 in the gray hymnal, number 170. We are a gentle, angry people. Please rise in body or in spirit. We will sing verses 1, 2, and 6 together this morning. Verses 1, 2, and 6. Speaking the words of our affirmation, our covenant. It's printed in the order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please be seated. So you might have noticed that we've used a word a few times this morning already that we don't usually use in worship, at least not at this point. And that word is angry. It so happens that today is a 7 deadly sins sermon, and so we are talking about anger, and we're doing it in connection with St. Patrick's Day for the Troubles in Ireland. But anger is something that is good to talk about in worship and in church because sometimes we need to figure out how to use our anger or at least live with it. How many of you get angry sometimes? Yeah, that's what I thought. How many of you are angry today? Oh, I see a hand or two. Yeah, I can understand why. Sometimes there are things to be angry about. Today's story is about Sophie. It's written by Molly Bang, and it's called When Sophie Gets Angry. Really, really angry. Sophie is a little girl. Can't quite tell exactly how old, maybe somewhere between 4 and 7. Old enough to be angry and to be able to express it, and old enough for us all to recognize what that angry feels like. So once upon a time, Sophie was playing with her family when she grabbed hold of Gorilla, her favorite stuffed animal, and was playing with Gorilla and running around the room and having a great time. And then her little sister said, "It's my turn." And Sophie did not want to let Gorilla go. So she hugged it tighter and tighter and tighter and said, "Gorilla is mine." And her little sister said, No, I get a turn." And they tussled and they argued and they got a little angry. And then Sophie's dad said, "Actually, it is time for your younger sister to get to play with Gorilla." Sophie was not happy. And so she relaxed her grip a little bit, and her sister came and grabbed Gorilla and tried to pull Gorilla away, and it wasn't easy, but finally Sophie let go, and she discovered a feeling somewhere in the pit of her stomach. She was angry. She was getting more and more angry. Nobody knew that she wanted to play with Gorilla more than anybody else, that she loved Gorilla more than anybody else, and she got angrier and angrier until she left the room and went into another room, and she kicked things. Things, not people, so that's good, but she kicked things. And then she pounded on a pillow, and she let out a great big red roar. Nobody was impressed. Nobody was happy about it. Sophie wasn't happy. Her younger sister wasn't happy. Her father was not happy. And Sophie ran out the front door. And she went out into the woods where she preferred to be whenever she got angry, because she knew that if she stayed inside, she was just going to explode. And so she ran and ran and ran through the woods on their property, the places where she knew she could be. And she ran and ran and ran and ran and ran until she was out of breath. And all of her angry couldn't keep her running anymore. And then when she slowed down to a walk, having to take deep breaths, her arms and her legs tired, not a lot of angry left inside of her, she climbed up into her favorite tree and looked out and saw the leaves blowing in the wind. And she saw her playground area, their sandbox, and a swing. And she remembered the fun that she liked to have there. And then she remembered that she liked to have that fun with her younger sister, even if she was playing with Gorilla right now. And as she was there taking breaths and letting her body relax, she discovered that great big red roar had calmed down into something orange and then yellow. And with all of those leaves, it turned green, and with the blue of the sky, it turned blue. And soon her breaths were calm and peaceful. And she climbed down from the tree and went back to the house. And she wandered inside and apologized for behaving quite so explosively. And she knew that she was going to have a talk with her dad and her younger sister. But she also remembered that she could actually take control of her anger and not just let it be everything, everywhere, on top of everybody, all the time, but that with a little bit of thought and a little bit of motion and some good deep breaths, her anger could turn into peace. And she could come back inside and decide to play with her little sister and with Gorilla, rather than all by herself instead. It turns out that's what happens when Sophie gets angry. And hopefully, when she gets really, really angry, she'll remember how to take care of it even quicker than she did the first time. May it be so. And now let us sing our children and their teachers and parents out to their classes. The lyrics to We Will Keep a Place for You are in the order of service. We will keep a place for you wherever you may go. This home of faith and love you've come to know. Go in peace, bring hope to hearts that yearn. We will keep a place for you till you return. Our offering, the sharing of our resources for our shared work as a religious community, is a spiritual practice for us. By offering your time, talent, and treasure to this community, you help us to serve our members and friends and to make a difference in the world around us too. And so as part of our service, we share our general offering each week with organizations that do work in the world that bring us ever closer to creating beloved community. And so this month we share our offering with Levo International. Founded locally in 2016, Levo works with communities in Haiti, Jamaica, and Greater Hartford to create sustainable solutions to the problems of food insecurity. Partnering with other organizations, whether nonprofits or churches, Levo creates networks of people who grow food hydroponically and then share what they raise to feed their communities. Levo focuses on working with households and neighborhoods and community leaders to make sure that families are directly supported by their work and their educational programming. To give electronically, please use the QR codes on your order of service, the links in the description, or online on our website to make your donation to our offering. And here in the sanctuary, our offering will now be gratefully received. May these gifts so generously given sustain our community, the work that we do together, and other communities in the world that we believe have the chance to make the world a better place. Thank you. Thank you. Please rise, in body or in spirit, as we speak together our congregational reading. It is number 637, A Litany of Atonement. Number 637. Now, the nice thing about a litany is that the congregation responds with the same thing every time. And so those of you at home who don't have hymnals can also do this very easily too. And so after I speak the words in Roman type, we'll all speak together these words. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For each time that our greed has made us unaware of the needs of others, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For losing sight of our unity, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. For those and for so many acts both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of our separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. And now we will join in singing our doxology. It's in your order of service. Praise God for love we all may share. Praise God for beauty everywhere. Praise God for hope of good to be. Praise God for truth that makes us free. Amen. Please be seated. For our prayer today, I need to share with you this morning that we have a request for prayers for Nikki M., her mother, Deirdre, who had a massive stroke and is in critical care right now, and for the whole family who are figuring out how to respond, offer care, and to care for themselves too. This is a family that's just in this past year come back to our congregation after a little time away. And I know that they will appreciate our thoughts, our prayers, and our holding them in our hearts. Please join with me in prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, within and among and beyond us. Mystery that exists in the in-betweens of molecules and in the touching of hands. Community of being to which we all belong. Even as we wonder about what is happening with our weather, we recognize the glory of springtime, the beauty and the power of the earth upon which we live. We sing of our living and the lives that share this one wonderful and precious world with us. Help us to acknowledge our relatedness, our responsibilities to one another, our anger, our compassion, our love, our need for peace. Help us to acknowledge that we are connected not just to one another here, but to one another far beyond this place and to our largest community of all life. Remind us in each snowflake, each green leaf, each flower that will bloom, each twinkling star, each gust of air, each person we meet. Remind us, too, of the ways in which we might be fully engaged with one another, the ways in which we offer aid to the helpless, healing to the hurt, solace to the grieving. We know that when there is hardship, we must also celebrate the good things, the lives we have known and the possibilities of new life. Let us celebrate our ability to make change, to recreate the world in small and large ways so that it can be better today and better yet tomorrow. Let us take a moment in stillness for the unspoken prayers of our hearts. Our world, our communities, our lives are complex. They are full of joy and difficulty. They are full of peace and activity. In the midst of all of these things, may we live our lives so that we leave every place we go, each person we pass, better off than they were before we came. May it be so. Amen.
Our first reading is from Healing Anger, by the Dalai Lama. One of my fundamental beliefs is that not only do we inherently possess this potential or basis for compassion, but also the basic or fundamental human nature is gentleness. Not only human beings, but all sentient beings have gentleness as their fundamental nature. Being affectionate and being more wholesome in our behavior and thought seems to be much more suited to the physical structure of our body in terms of its effect on our healthy and physical well-being. It must also be noted how the contrary seems to be destructive to our health. Our second reading is a poem entitled A Just Anger by Marge Piercy. Anger shines through me. Anger shines through me. I am a burning bush. My rage is a cloud of flame. My rage is a cloud of flame in which I walk, seeking justice like a precipice. How the streets of the iron city flicker, flicker, and the dirty air fumes. Anger storms between me and things, transfiguring, transfiguring. A good anger acted upon is beautiful as lightning and swift with power. A good anger swallowed clots the blood to slime. Our third reading comes from Anger, Wisdom for Cooling the Flames by Thich Nhat Hanh. Punishing the other person is self-punishment. That is true in every circumstance. Every time the United States Army tries to punish Iraq, not only does Iraq suffer, but the U.S. also suffers. Every time Iraq tried to punish the U.S. suffers, but also Iraq suffers. The same is true everywhere, between the Israeli and Palestinian, between the Muslim and Hindu, between you and the other person. It has always been like that. So let us wake up. Let us be aware that punishing the other is not an intelligent strategy. Both you and the other person are intelligent. You can use your intelligence. You must come together and agree on a strategy for taking care of your anger.
I wish but I'm sick now. My days are over. Come ye on lands, and lay me down.
A few years ago, I read a book called The Lemon Tree. Perhaps some of you know of this book, are familiar with it. It tells the true story of two families that owned one house from the 1930s through the 2000s, and how a lemon tree planted by the first family became a symbol for the connections and the love that each had for that home and that land. It is also the story of Bashir and Dahlia, who meet in 1967, the day that Bashir comes back to his home village and returns to the house in which he grew up, hoping to look inside of it once again, and where Dahlia, who also grew up in the house some years later, is now living. And there is another layer, because this is also the story of the Palestinians and the Israelis. The Palestinians who built the house and planted the tree and fled armed battle only to discover that they could not return home. And the Israelis, immigrant Jews who moved in after having been told that the village and house had been willingly abandoned by the people who had lived there. It's not so easy a story as it sounds in that first version. And all of these descriptions are true. It is the story of a family and another family and the lemon tree that they cherished. It is the story of Bashir and Dahlia who meet in 1967. And it is the story of conflict. And it is not an easy story. But there is a beauty in this story, a symbolism that is powerful and hopeful, even as it is a story that is infused with anger and injustice and suffering. If you have not read it, it is a book that I think is well worth reading. In part because it echoes stories from all over the world. Stories of being powerless in your own place, shifting borders and battles for territory, finding new places to live, control, or consume resources. Native Americans and Native Hawaiians can tell similar stories. The truth is that people on every human-occupied continent, North and South America, Africa, Australia, Asia, and Europe, can tell these stories. And people of various cultures have been on both sides of these tales. We're talking about anger today as we talk about the 7 deadly sins this year, because of the version of this story that I know the best, the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I'll give you a quick synopsis. In Ireland, which had been long independent even during the time of Roman rule elsewhere, the English began their control of the island in the late 1100s, consolidated in the 15 and 1600s, and made it part of the United Kingdom in 1801. And by 1922, many of the counties broke free and became the independent Republic of Ireland, or as many of us call it, the South. The North, however, remained under British control, and still does. And it eventually became a nearly constant battleground of militias and terrorism starting in the 1960s. Belfast and Derry became deadly places. Weaponry and bombs were an expected part of daily life. And the Troubles continued into the 1990s and there have been occasional outbreaks of violence since then. In times and places like this, anger becomes a normal state of being. Not just a thing that arises in a moment because of injustice or because your favorite toy is being taken away from you, but it becomes the undercurrent, the constant feeling in life. Anger about being occupied or displaced, anger about feeling unsafe, anger that comes from feelings of superiority or ownership, of shame, of certainty, injustice. I traveled to Ireland in the mid-1990s, and when I went, people said, not so much to me, but to my mother, "Why are you letting him go? Is it safe?" And I was going to be traveling through the South mostly, so it was perfectly safe as any place else. I could hitchhike around and it was safe. But the North, there were still some issues. And one of the things that I learned while I was there, that even as people were crying out for peace, your average everyday person in the North, they were not interested in violence or in bombs. They were looking for life. Quiet, calm, get on with your day life. They wanted to find a way forward that would end the strife and suffering. They wanted to find a way that would end the anger and the social and economic profits from that anger. On both sides of the conflict, anger was no longer a thing that happened in a moment. It wasn't an emotion, a reaction to injustice, a temporary motivation, but it became a constant perspective and a way of life. And this is where anger can become a deadly sin. Because there's a huge difference between righteous anger and wrathful anger. Often we hear the 7 deadly sins and we use the word anger, but the truth is, a better word for it is wrath, which implies a constant being of rage and fury. These kinds of angers are related, but they're not the same. Marge Piercy points that out to us, saying that a good anger is something to burn brightly and be expressed, but that it should not linger and settle into us. Good anger tells us that something is wrong, that we should engage with the problem, but it's temporary. She writes, "Anger shines through me. Anger shines through me. I am a burning bush. My rage is a cloud of flame. My rage is a cloud of flame in which I walk, seeking justice like a precipice. How the streets of the iron city flicker, and the dirty air fumes. Anger storms between me and things, transfiguring. A good anger acted upon is beautiful as lightning and swift with power. A good anger swallowed clots the blood to slime." The problem occurs when anger becomes a condition of the soul, a habit of the heart and the mind. There may be things to be angry about, but when we swallow that anger, when we feed ourselves upon it, use it as sustenance, then anger becomes a poison. When we live angry, we cease to see the value in anything but our own perspective. When we become hardened through anger, we cease to be whole people. We stop recognizing our love and our joy, our ability to celebrate, to be compassionate, to fully engage. Instead, we cut off the parts of ourselves that connect us to others, especially the people that we don't think share our perspectives. When anger becomes wrathful instead of righteous, we step out of our wholeness. We step out of our relationships, our sense of meaning. We pull ourselves away from the spirit of life, however we understand it. And so in wrath, we become enraged, destructive, ready to destroy everything, to eliminate what we have identified as the cause of our anger. We don't just let out one great big red roar and beat a pillow. We let out many red roars, constant. We stop beating pillows, perhaps, and whether with words or perhaps our bodies, we beat other things and people too. Wrath causes us to become so intensely focused that we disregard love and truth and mercy. It may not be common that you hear somebody say in church, especially from the pulpit, "Hey, sometimes anger is good." We often believe that all of those emotions must be stifled and stilled and held back. But the truth is that anger can be born from love, from the sense that there is injustice or harm being done. Sometimes anger is important, is necessary. It drives us to protest or to vote, to have conversations, even difficult ones, that might be deeply necessary. But wrath is what happens when the anger takes over from love. It is a deadly sin, perhaps deadly to others, perhaps deadly to ourselves, especially when we direct it at the wrong targets or when we cease to care about anything but the destruction of the perceived threat. The antidote to anger is not love, though, or apathy, but gentleness. The Dalai Lama writes, "The basic or fundamental human nature is gentleness. And not only human beings, but all sentient beings have gentleness as their fundamental nature. Being affectionate, being wholesome in our behavior and thought seems to be much more suited to the physical structure of our body in terms of its effect on our health and our physical well-being. The contrary is destructive. Gentleness tempers anger. It doesn't necessarily quash it, but instead it can help to keep anger from becoming vicious. We don't often think of it this way, but gentleness can remain firm in its position, seeking to stop harm or injustice without being destructive. Gentleness is actually good for the angry person as well as the rest of the world, because it helps to preserve our emotional, physical, and spiritual health. Right? So anger is something that we know we feel physically as well as emotionally. Think about the story with Sophie, and she gets angry, and she starts to feel a feeling in the pit of her stomach. When I asked how many of you have ever been angry, everybody raised their hands. So I'm guessing that all of you have felt something like that, whether it's a feeling in the pit of your stomach, or your heart starting to pound, or your hands clenched into fists. I know when I'm really, really angry because I burst into tears. Anger can create a sense of power. And that can be useful, but it's not so helpful when it's out of control. Living in anger is just unhealthy. It affects us bodily, it affects our relationships, it affects our world. But the answer then is not to refuse anger, to pretend it doesn't exist or that we don't feel it, because that is harmful as well. The gentleness that the Dalai Lama is talking about is not passivity, it's not blandness. That gentleness is a habit of the heart and the mind, a way of being, a condition of the soul that helps keep anger in its rightful place. Gentleness is a way of caring that can coexist with anger. Thich Nhat Hanh says punishing the other person is self-punishment. And the same thing is true everywhere. Between the Israeli and the Palestinian, between the Muslim and the Hindu, between you and another person. Let us wake up. We must come together and agree on a strategy for taking care of your anger. When I read that last line, I kind of stopped for a moment and thought about the two ways taking care of your anger could be understood. Because in English, when we say, "I'll take care of it," we often mean, "I will eliminate the problem." And that's not what Thich Nhat Hanh is suggesting. He's not talking about getting rid of your anger. He means literally to care for it. To recognize anger, be aware of its presence, accept, allow it to be there. Take care of it so that it does not become destructive. He goes on to say it like this: embrace your anger with a lot of tenderness. Your anger is not your enemy. Your anger is your baby, your child. It is like your stomach or your lungs. When you have trouble with your stomach and your lungs, you do not think to throw them away. And the same is true with your anger. Accept your anger because you know you can take care of it. You can transform it into positive energy. Embrace your anger with a lot of tenderness. This is what I thought of when I was reading the story when Sophie gets angry. What if Sophie is a metaphor? Sure, she's a child, she is angry because she's not getting what she wants, but what if she is a metaphor for that part of us that rages? And what if the story happened a little differently? Sophie took care of her own anger, that's great. But what if in our own moments we recognize our own Sophies? Red roars, kicking and punching, ready to explode and all, and instead of watching as she runs out the door and runs in circles around the yard, what if we embraced our Sophies with tenderness? What if we took care of our anger like they were our children? Like they were our hearts and lungs and stomachs? So I go back to the lemon tree, where the heart of this story, the thing that cannot be thrown away, is the friendship that Bashir and Dahlia forge, despite the fact that they are on the opposite sides of what certainly seems like an insurmountable conflict. Their friendship is complicated by the history of the Holocaust, Jewish immigration to Palestine, the creation of Israel, and the obliteration of Palestinian communities and places. Bashir wants his homeland back. He wants his home back. And he is angry, but he is gentle with his friend. And Dahlia, too, is angry. She's angry about violence and history. She's angry about all the ways in which people have been treated incredibly poorly, both her people and others. And she, too, is gentle with her friend. Sandy Tolan, the author of The Lemon Tree, describes Dahlia's story this way. Each had chosen to reside within the contradiction. They were enemies, and they were friends. And Dahlia said, I will not be able to look myself in the face if I leave when it gets difficult. I will stay present for the pain and for the hope. I am an integral part of it all. I am part and parcel of this complexity. I am part of the problem, and I am part of the solution. Whether it's the north of Ireland, or this continent, or any place else in the world, whether it is an insurmountable family conflict, or a disagreement between neighbors, or co-workers. In the midst of these situations, we struggle with how to fix what is broken, how to restore relationship, how to help everyone see the full humanity of everybody involved, how to create justice after generations, even, of injustice. And so if that's the case, we have to figure out how to be angry in ways that are healing and justice-making, not wrathful and destructive. And that's not easy. It takes hard work. It takes careful thought and self-awareness. But that is what it means to do the work of taking care of your anger. To understand the part you play. To speak and act against injustice with firmness and clarity. To let anger be lightning rather than poison. To express it with gentleness so that it never becomes deadly or wrathful or destructive to yourself or anyone else. May it be so. May it be so for all of us and for the whole of our world. Amen. Our final hymn is Amazing Grace. Ted, let me ask, what version of the music are you using?
205.
Excellent. So, in the order of service, it's written as 20. It is not 20. It's actually 205 in the gray hymnal, number 205. Please rise in body or in spirit as we sing together.
Amazing grace, how sweet the
Let us speak together our unison benediction. It is in your order of service. Engage with the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. Please be seated and remain for our postlude.